I used to believe parents would always love their children and that grandparents would do anything for their grandchildren. But 5 years ago, I found out just how wrong I was when my daughter's life was on the line. I begged my parents to help. We needed $120,000 for her surgery, and they had the money. But they looked at me, cold as stone, and said, "We already spent $300,000 on your sister's wedding. Don't ask us for more." That was the moment I realized in their eyes I wasn't family anymore. All because I didn't marry the man they wanted me to, because I chose love over money. My husband and I were struggling, but his parents, though barely making ends meet, sold their house to save our daughter. That day, I lost my parents, but I found my real family. 5 years later, my parents showed up again, not with flowers, not with apologies, but with desperation. In this story, I'll tell you how I went from broken to unbreakable, how I turned their rejection into fire and built something they couldn't even imagine. And when they came back to ask for help, I didn't cry, I didn't shout. I just looked at them and said, "Remember 5 years ago? Stay with me." Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. I've always been the quieter one, the one who found solace in the blueprints and the geometry of things. A contrast to my sister Chloe, who was, and always will be, the family's centerpiece, the one built for the spotlight. Our parents, Eleanor and Gregory Hayes, ran their real estate empire with the precision of a Swiss watch, a world of manicured lawns and seven-figure deals. And they saw me as a valuable but slightly inconvenient asset to be leveraged, a piece that needed to fit neatly into their grand design. But I wanted to build my own legacy, not just inherit one. My heart was in the art of building homes, not just selling them. When I chose to marry Leo, a passionate but struggling architect, instead of the blue-blooded Jasper Langford they'd chosen for me, I knew I was drawing a line in the sand, a line that my mother, Eleanor, confirmed with a single, cold sentence that I'll never forget. "You can have your freedom, Evelyn, but it will cost you your family." And for a long time, I believed it was a fair trade, because with Leo, I had found a love that felt like a foundation, a safe haven where we built a life not with inherited wealth, but with our own two hands. A life where I felt seen and valued for who I truly was. But that was before I realized the true price of that freedom. The price that would be paid not by me, but by my sweet, vibrant daughter, Lily. The shock came not with a thunderclap, but with a whisper, a doctor's gentle voice explaining that my 3-year-old Lily, my sunshine and my laughter, had a rare congenital heart defect that was slowly suffocating her. The only solution was a surgery that would cost $120,000, a number that felt like a death sentence, when all our savings were tied up in the fledgling design firm Leo and I were building. Every single dollar we had was a brick in a wall we were trying to build for our future. And now, that wall had to come tumbling down just to give our daughter a chance, my parents. Meanwhile, we're putting the finishing touches on what was set to be the social event of the season. A $300,000 fairy tale wedding for my sister Chloe, my heart. A thing I thought was already fractured beyond repair by years of their emotional neglect. Shattered again as I held Lily in my arms, her small body struggling for air. I could see the faint blue tinge on her lips, a terrifying sight that screamed louder than any words. I knew, with a certainty that was both devastating and shameful, that there was only one place to go, one last, desperate chance to save her. I called my mother first, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. And the silence on the other end was a sound all its own, a hollow, dismissive absence of empathy. She said they would discuss it, a phrase I knew meant it was already a lost cause, but I had to try. As I drove up the familiar, perfectly manicured driveway, I could already hear the echoes of laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, a soundtrack of my family's perfect life, a world where the price of a party mattered more than the life of a child. My daughter's weakening, silent struggle for life was set against the opulent, noisy backdrop of my sister's wedding preparations. I didn't knock. I rang the bell, and when the door opened, the cool, detached gaze of my mother, Eleanor, met mine. Her eyes like chipped porcelain, perfectly blank. A maid scurried past with a silver platter of canapes, and I smelled the rich scent of truffles and expensive wine. I choked out the words, my throat raw with panic. It's Lily. She's sick. She needs a surgery. We need help. My father Gregory appeared, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand. His jaw clenched. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and the unspoken tension that had always existed between us. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something that looked almost like pity, but it was gone as quickly as it came. My mother's response was a knife made of ice. Her voice a low, chilling whisper. "We have already made our commitment to Chloe. We will not be involved. You made your choice 5 years ago. Evelyn, now you must live with it." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were sharp enough on their own. And then my sister Chloe, in a breathtaking white gown, appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her face a mask of practiced sympathy as she looked away, a silent accomplice to this quiet, brutal execution of what little dignity I had left. The light from a crystal chandelier caught the diamond on her finger, a dazzling beacon of all the things my parents valued. I dropped to my knees on the cold marble floor, my hands outstretched, begging. "She's your granddaughter, please. Just a fraction of what you're spending on this party. Just a tenth, please." I felt the cold seeping through my jeans, a stark physical representation of their emotional coldness, but the door closed, not with a slam, but with a soft, final click, and I was left alone in the cold, the sound of their party fading behind me, the cold stone on my knees a stark reminder of the choices they had made. My silent kneeling, a mother begging for her daughter's life while a party goes on behind the closed doors, the cold stone beneath me a testament to their cruelty. My salvation came not from my blood, but from my chosen family, from the parents of my husband, Leo, when we told them about Lily, sitting around their worn kitchen table with its chipped edges and a vase of wildflowers from the garden. They didn't hesitate. I saw the worry in my husband's eyes, the shame that he couldn't provide more, but his father, Robert, simply placed a hand on my husband's shoulder. "We're not just your in-laws, son," he said, his voice as steady as the oak tree in their yard. "We're your family, and you don't let families suffer." His mother, Martha, wiped a tear from her eye, not of sadness, but of conviction. "We'd rather live in a tent with our granddaughter alive than in this house without her," she said, her voice filled with the profound love I had never known. The next day, they sold their small, beloved home in the suburbs, the home they had built with decades of hard work and love. As I watched Martha sign the paperwork, her hands trembling but her eyes filled with a peace I had never seen in my own mother's, I understood what it meant to be truly loved. It wasn't about inherited wealth or grand gestures. It was about sacrifice, about showing up when no one else would. We used that money, along with the funds we raised through a small GoFundMe campaign started by an old college friend, to pay for Lily's surgery. The outpouring of support from strangers, from people who read our story and were moved by it, was overwhelming. It was a clear message: you're not alone. The surgery was a success, and as Lily's chest rose and fell with a steady, peaceful rhythm, a fire ignited within me, a cold, hard resolve to never again be in a position where I had to beg anyone for anything. I started with my company, rebranding it not with a flashy commercial name, but as Lily's Haven, a tribute to the quiet strength of a child and the profound love of those who are truly family. Leo and I poured ourselves into our work, designing not just buildings, but spaces with soul, and the world, it turned out, was hungry for that kind of authenticity. We took on projects that spoke to us, designing community centers, libraries, and homes that were built to be lived in, not just looked at. We worked day and night, fueled by a purpose that went far beyond profit. The image of Leo's parents, old and tired, signing away their life's work for my child's life, was a silent testament to a love that transcends blood, and it was a wellspring of motivation that never ran dry. We never forgot their sacrifice, and as our firm grew, we made sure to take care of them, buying them a new, smaller home, and making sure they never had to worry about money again. 5 years later, the perfect facade of the Hayes empire began to crumble, the result of a series of bad investments and a web of financial mismanagement by my brother-in-law, my sister's husband. That led to a public scandal. I saw their photos on the news, my father, his face gaunt and pale, and my mother, her usual perfect posture slumped in defeat. The headlines screamed about a family legacy in ruins, and a quiet, almost sad satisfaction settled over me. They were facing bankruptcy, and all their carefully cultivated social connections were evaporating. The call came late one evening. My mother's voice, not cold this time, but strained and brittle. "Evelyn, we need your help. We're losing the house. We need $180,000. As she spoke, the words "you made your choice, now you live with it" echoed in my mind, a ghost of her former cruelty. I didn't shout. I didn't celebrate. I simply invited them to my new office. The office I had built with my own hands, with the help of those who believed in me. An office with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. A quiet statement of my success. When they arrived, their expensive clothes unable to hide the desperation in their eyes, I didn't give them a lecture. I simply opened the briefcase on the conference table, revealing 20 stacks of $100 bills, the exact amount they needed. But the money, I explained, came with a condition: they must publicly release a statement, not of apology, but of truth, admitting their choice 5 years ago. My father, Gregory, his face a mask of pride and shame, simply said, "We'd rather lose everything than lose face." And he slammed the case shut and walked out, followed by my mother, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The moment I revealed the money, the very thing they need, but tied it to the one thing they refused to give: the truth. As I watched them walk away, the silence in the room was not empty, but full of the kind of peace that comes from knowing you didn't just survive. You won. The victory wasn't about their downfall or my success. It was about my own liberation, about a heart that had finally healed. The final scene, a quiet dinner at my home, a home filled with laughter and love, a home I built with my husband and my daughter and our family. The Reeds solidified my new reality, a life no longer defined by the family I was born into, but by the family I chose. The best revenge, I realized, isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full of joy and purpose that the people who hurt you can no longer reach you, and their absence becomes a blessing. I sat alone in my sleek office, the hum of the city a distant murmur against the polished glass. The heavy briefcase sat on the conference table between us, a stark monument to a conversation that was over before it began. I watched the door my parents had just exited, the sound of its soft, final click echoing in the sudden silence. For a brief, agonizing moment, a wave of crippling doubt washed over me. Was this the right choice? Had I, in my quest for justice, become as cold as them? My mind, an architect's mind, began to meticulously rebuild the past, brick by emotional brick. I thought of my father, Gregory. I could see him at the chessboard in his study, a faint smile on his face as he taught me the subtle, silent power of a knight's move. He was a man of strategy, and he saw life as a game to be won, not a journey to be lived. He'd get frustrated when I wouldn't follow his precise instructions, his interest in me fading the moment I deviated from his plan. I remember one birthday, my mother, Eleanor, had a famous baker create a multi-tiered cake that looked like a mansion, a perfect, inedible structure. All I had wanted was a simple chocolate cake with rainbow sprinkles, the kind that reminded me of my childhood. But my mother insisted. This is what people expect. Evelyn? Her love was not in what she gave, but in how it looked to the rest of the world. Then there were the smaller, more private memories. My sister Chloe and I sharing secrets under the covers. A bond that was real, but constantly overshadowed by her role as the golden child. I remembered the rare moments of her vulnerability, when the weight of perfection seemed to crack her carefully crafted facade. Was I holding a grudge against two people who were trapped in a life of their own, making a part of me? The part that still yearned for a family, felt a deep, aching sadness. Maybe their love was just different, not absent. Maybe I should have just helped, no strings attached, to show them what unconditional love was. But then, the most powerful memory of all came crashing down, a cold flood that washed away the nostalgia, the feeling of that cold marble floor on my knees, the desperate plea leaving my lips, the blue tint on my daughter Lily's lips. I heard my mother's voice, a chilling whisper, "You made your choice, now you must live with it." The coldness wasn't a flaw, it was a choice. The memory of my parents' faces, impassive and unyielding, was a stark contrast to the faces of Leo's parents, Robert and Martha. I saw Martha's trembling hands signing away her home, her eyes full of a love that was real, raw, and unburdened by ego. That was what family meant. In that moment, all doubt vanished. My decision was not an act of revenge, but an act of self-preservation. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking toward the people who would show me what true family was. The victory wasn't in seeing them lose, but in my own liberation. I was free. I stood up, closed the briefcase, and walked out of the office. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of peace, a peace I had built myself. I was finally ready to go home, not just to a house, but to a haven built on love, not on blood.